Good afternoon, everyone. Tommy Grisafi with ATI Pro Media. This afternoon, we have a special guest, Lauren Lurkins from Lurkins Strategies. She's new to the show, but she has a bunch of exciting stuff she wants to talk about. Something that's on the mind of all farmers, carbon. Lauren, welcome to ATI Pro Media.
Tommy, thank you for having me. This is super fun. Like Tommy said, my name is Lauren Lurkins, and I'm the founder of a consulting firm, Lurkins Strategies LLC, based in Bloomington, Illinois. I have spent the last 17 years on environmental law and policy issues, with the last 10 of those years focused in agriculture. I am an environmental attorney and also a lobbyist at the federal and state level. With that, the topic that we want to talk about today is actually the importance of carbon reduction for the ethanol industry across the country. And the name of the game is really climate change. And agriculture, just like other sectors of industry across the country, are focused on how they can benefit the environment and lower their carbon intensity, whether the driver is ESG, carbon markets, carbon offsets or insets, life cycle analyses, or even just corporate sustainability. They're looking at doing what they do, making money, but also having a smaller footprint when it comes to the environment. So, today, with regard to the ethanol industry, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the threats and also the opportunities when you think about carbon intensity and carbon reduction and corn. And the first, we'll start with the bad news, right? We'll start with the threats. The first threat for this environmental lawyer and lobbyist is actually the US EPA. The EPA a couple months ago proposed a rule that was an electric vehicle mandate rule at the federal level. And lots of parts of that rule, but the biggest part was that by 2032, they would require by federal regulation 67% of all new light duty vehicles and trucks to be electric. We expect that rule to be finalized very soon and obviously probably legally challenged in our court system. The other thing that's happening out of the federal government is another proposed rulemaking. This one is sort of hand in glove approach with the EPA, but it's the US Department of Transportation and it's all about fleet efficiency. Also, there you're seeing quite a focus on electric vehicles. In fact, they're asking for a 58% improvement on efficiencies by 2032. They can only be accomplished by going electric. And then no environmental conversation would be complete without talking about the state of California. California, as many of you know, has an EV mandate itself, and they're not the only state. There's about 16 other states that also have those EV mandates in place. And so one of those threats alone can be very damaging to the ethanol industry, but all of them cumulatively have a great impact. When we talk about the EPA EV mandate alone, we're looking at a 1 billion bushel of corn demand destruction by 2032 if that were to become final rule as it was proposed. So with that in mind, let's talk about the opportunities that come when we start to talk about carbon reduction and corn. The first is that the CO2 that's produced off of the ethanol process can be reused in a number of industries, and that's exciting. You know, people who make corn-based ethanol can make a whole bunch of other products. It's very exciting and a whole new sort of green industry. And the other thing that can happen with the CO2 off of a lot of industrial processes, including ethanol production, actually is that it can be captured and sequestered in our deep geology. We're sitting here in Illinois, where this is the part of the state that has very favorable geology for carbon capture and sequestration. I'll talk about it here in a second, but that is actually that carbon capture and sequestration is what will really open the door for ethanol into the future to really access international markets and also to access the coolest, shiniest thing that we talk about now, which is sustainable aviation fuel. So for corn ethanol to be qualifying for the sustainable aviation tax fuel or fuel tax credits that were involved in the Inflation Reduction Act, they do have to see a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions when you compare it to petroleum jet fuel. That is doable. There's a discussion now within the Treasury Department on rules with regard to what model you're going to be able to base that off of. But those tax credits for SAF will be they're in action now and they will expire as the law is written in the next couple of years. So really now is the time to be talking about carbon and sequestration projects. which is why we have a lot of conversation, not just about those well locations for the sequestration, but also the CO2 pipelines. This has been the conversation across state legislatures and regulatory bodies with a number of companies that are engaged in the space. Just late October, one of the companies named Navigator had actually announced that it was canceling its plans for a 1,300-mile pipeline that went across Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, Illinois, and Iowa. They found the challenging regulatory process to be too much for them to handle. But there are other companies that are in this conversation as well. One is Summit, which involves a 2,000-mile pipeline that would run through Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. They're in the process of reworking some of the applications before the regulatory bodies in North Dakota and South Dakota, but they have 35 ethanol plants already signed up. And then the final company is Wolf Carbon Solutions that would run a pipeline from Cedar Rapids to Decatur. There are also other pipelines that are being discussed and other companies in the mix. The conversation, though, has been around Navigator's announcement that it would remove itself and its discussion on the pipelines. Lots of conversation around will this whole issue die or what will happen. And I really believe from the things I read and the things that I know and the people that I talk to that we will continue to see conversation about with regard to ethanol in particular, carbon sequestration, and the pipelines. I do foresee that state legislatures across the Midwest, including here in Illinois, will continue the discussions reacting to environmental and farmer interest on safety and also private property rights. And you'll continue to have the discussion on is it voluntary easements or eminent domain, which gets the attention of farmers every single day. So I do believe that we'll continue to see discussion, and we really do need to, as far as the agricultural industry, think about the long-term impact with or without carbon sequestration on corn markets. So it kind of goes without saying, but this is a very complicated topic, and we can continue to evolve both politically and regulatory, and obviously environmentally. So we can continue to check back in.
Well, that was awesome. And farmers are asking about this all the time. And we have to come to an expert like you to get more information like this. I got a feeling we'll be hearing from you some more. And there's a lot of other hot topics out there. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes, I would love to come back and tell you a little bit more of the news. The interesting thing about the topics that I talk about, it's not something usually that farmers love to hear about, but it helps you make your decisions on the farm and also kind of seeing the big picture on federal policy.
That's awesome. Lauren Lurkins, Lurkins Strategies. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.